Welcome to the Free Cities podcast. My name is Timothy Allen, and this is the official podcast of the Free Cities Foundation. Hello and welcome to episode number 52 of the Free Cities podcast. Well, you know what this means, don't you? We've been putting out a podcast every week for exactly 1 year now. So, happy birthday to us. The Free Cities podcast is 1 year old today. It's hard to believe, really. I've spoken to Free Cities adjacent people now for, if you include the unpublished episodes, more than 100 hours. That's more than 4 days of non-stop discussion about this stuff. Well, I suppose I should run off a few of my highlights from the last year. One of my favourite episodes, and the episode with the most listens across all our platforms, was episode number 5 from way back in late December of last year. That was a candid discussion I had with a Canadian couple, Tom and Emily, who my family made friends with when we were living in El Salvador over the pandemic period. They were the so-called COVID refugees who left Canada looking for a freer life in Central America. I loved that conversation, very easygoing and authentic. And if you're interested, here's a little update on their family, because obviously we're still good friends. They're still in El Salvador. They've obtained citizenship for their whole family, and they bought a parcel of land in the hills above El Zonte, where they're in the early stages of building a home. So good luck to them. Great people, great story. I also loved recording some of the early episodes we did in Prague. Episode 16 with Caroline King about leaving Sweden to homeschool her kids in the Czech Republic. And Max Hillebrand in episode 17, which was a 4-hour conversation about Bitcoin. So I know that's not for everyone, but certainly a conversation that bent my mind out of shape a little, that's for sure. Then more recently in June, I spoke with a gentleman by the name of Thomas Walker Worth in Portugal about city planning and architecture. Loved that episode. Plus, Thomas was the first person to open my eyes to the subject of free cities in space. That was episode 31. Also, if you like that one, check out a similar vibe in episode 45 with Patrick Lamson Hall and Nuria Forquez, who were the couple who designed the plans for Ciudad Morazan. Then, of course, there are all 3 of Titus's episodes. That's 34, 36 and 50. Always a pleasure to speak with someone who has such a deep understanding of this movement. Then there was Daniel Prince's episode. That was number 46. Dan's a great friend. And I just love the zero judgment, zero expectations conversations we have. And finally, I suppose, there's the episodes that I've recorded but not released yet. There's Joe Quirk, who's an excellent conversationalist, Christopher Beaumont and Sven Lorenz from SARC, Vit Jedlichter, I can never say his name, Vit Jedlitka from Lieberland, and Massimo Mazzone from Morazan, to name but a few, along with today's guest, who I really enjoyed talking to, and that was Jeremy Kauffman. Now, Jeremy is a tech entrepreneur and well-known activist in the American Libertarian movement, also deeply involved in the New Hampshire Free State Project, which is what I wanted to discuss with him in this conversation. Of course, he currently lives in New Hampshire and was the Libertarian nominee for the 2022 US Senate election there. In this episode, we discuss the Free State Project, of course, and the political landscape in general, along with Jeremy's takes on the libertarian movement and how best to carve out a pathway to freedom in the future. There's also some chat about AI, frontier spaces, collapsatarianism. I love discovering new words. I'll let you work that one out. Jeremy's opinion on the Free Cities movement, and I get the lowdown on why I should come and visit PorcFest, which is New Hampshire's epic Libertarian Freedom Festival. Definitely going to that one in the future. Well, that's it. Before I leave you, though, I just want to say happy birthday to us once again, and a big thank you to all of you for popping over to listen every week. I do love doing this, and I feel very fortunate to get to meet all of these incredibly optimistic, inspirational human beings. Everyone here is striving to create real change in the world, and I'm 100% here for that. So I wish you all well, and I look forward to many shows to come. Now, it just leaves for me to say to you one more time, the 52nd time in fact, please just sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Jeremy Kauffman. I don't have a connection to the Free State Project, and I don't know a huge amount about it. So forgive me if I ask some relatively simple questions. Funnily enough, though, there was a family. This is only during the pandemic. There was a local family where I live in Wales. I live in mid Wales, and when the pandemic hit and everyone was locking people down and that kind of stuff, they sold their house and were planning on going to New Hampshire. But I just didn't know what New Hampshire State Project was at the time. I didn't even know they were libertarians. But if I get the gist of it, it was a plan to bring a bunch of libertarians to one particular place and then try and have a political impact in that place. Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Yeah, that's a very fair way of looking at it. It was a recognition that libertarians, and of course libertarians themselves like to debate that term, and our movement doesn't take the strongest stance on it, but I'd say it's someone who believes strongly in private property and things being voluntary in terms of how we agree to things. And we say, hey, if you're a libertarian, you've got to look around, and it's not, you can call it a political worldview, but it's an ethical worldview too. It says how we ought to be interacting with each other. And realistically, and unfortunately, it's a minority belief. It's not a widespread belief. And our movement started by a guy named Jason Soren saying, hey, look, libertarians have been at this, and there are more libertarians in America than anywhere in the world as far as I can tell, and we're still a minority there, a substantial one. And Jason Sorens looked around and said, hey, everything we're doing isn't working. Let's not keep making the same mistake, right? That's the definition of insanity, to do the same thing and expect a different result. And I think the Free Cities people here get that very well as well. I'm sure we'll come back to that. But so Jason said, but there's enough of us, right? There's millions of us in America and even more around the world. So what if we started to concentrate our forces? And that was the central idea. And today, I believe there are more than 10,000 Free Staters in New Hampshire. We have 40 of them in the legislature. We are widely regarded as the freest state in America by a substantial margin. Now, it's not some libertarian utopia. We don't claim we're creating a libertarian utopia, but it is a place where libertarians are winning. And I think it's really the only place where libertarians are winning. And so there are both benefits politically of living in New Hampshire if you're a libertarian, and there's a lot of sort of social and psychological benefits from being sort of less alone and kind of being able to, and I'm not saying you're lonely. I wasn't a lonely guy in Philadelphia. I had plenty of friends before I moved to New Hampshire, but I didn't have a lot of people who really deeply shared my beliefs. And in New Hampshire, I found a lot of them.
Okay, then a couple of questions that just came to mind then. One is, libertarians are a minority, as you say. There's a lot of people, and I think I might be one of those, that think that's always going to be the case, actually. And it's a funny movement because I've gone through a bit of a process myself with regards to freedom and realizing that actually I used to want everyone to be free, and now I realize that there's only a few people that want to be free, actually, and you may as well just stick together with them. I don't know what you think about that is. The other question will be, how's it going politically? I did a bit of a search on your bio, and it turns out you were you went for the US Senate and lost in 2022, did you? Has anyone won? Like, have any of the libertarians like politically made headway there?
Well, the Free State Project itself, while it encourages people to run under any party, we don't. Let me actually explain this, because this is going to come up throughout the show. You've got the Free State Project, which is a formal 501c3 corporation. It effectively exists to market New Hampshire. It recruits libertarians to come to New Hampshire. It is not the movement, right? The movement is 10,000 people. They're not taking marching orders from the Free State Project. The Free State Project kind of pays attention to what Free Staters are doing, tries to talk about it, and tries to promote libertarians coming here. And then while we'll introduce you to various other organizations or various other individuals, we're not trying to give any kind of orders or commands or even suggestions inside the state. We just exist to market. And so there's sort of the movement and there's the project. The project is just the marketing arm. The movement is this cloudier thing that, like any other movement, who explicitly controls the social justice movement or whatever. You'll have prominent figures, but there's not this explicit, go down the hierarchy of who's in charge here, And so that's the way our movement works. And politically, we've had a ton of success, just not through the Libertarian Party and not really through the Democratic Party, although we have had a couple of Free Staters win as Democrats. But we've had, again, more than 40 win as Republicans. We have our first state senator. We have the House Majority Leader. And we also have a non-profit called the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, which grades every elected representative. And by their scores, we have around 100 libertarians who are elected. And that doesn't include local office. If you tally up all the local office people, the control of local parties, the mainstream press, the Democrats, the Republicans, everyone will tell you that Free Staters are one of the most substantial political factions inside of New Hampshire, and we're ascendant as well, while they're full of 6-year-olds who are there's not a lot of youthful people coming into, say, the Democratic Party in New Hampshire. And then you had another comment, I don't know if you want me to go back to it, about how many people can become libertarians. And so I'm speaking as myself here, but I went through a journey that I think a lot of people do. You discover the ideas and you're like, these are so great. And if all I have to do is explain them to people, right? Have you heard of markets? You don't like poverty. I have the solution for you, but it turns out that a lot of leftists aren't interested in free market solutions. So they purport to have these ethical values, and you can come to them with libertarian solutions and say, look, these are really great ways to solve these problems. And yet they don't seem to like them. And as I got wiser, I learned that a lot of times people's, sort of stated motives and stated beliefs aren't their real ones. And so, I consider myself a realistic libertarian, and I would say that the majority of people aren't libertarian and won't be. However, the majority of people also don't care. And that's why the majority of people will go Nazi or go socialist or go whatever. And so, if you have enough of a density of people who do care, who are active, there's a lot of people who will just kind of, their psychology is, I want to go along to get along. And so part of the reason that our movement works without it being 100% libertarians is you only need, and there's social scientists literally argue at what the density is. We're at around half percent, 1%. I don't think that's quite high enough. But if we start hitting, 3, 4, 5%, we really can become the dominant ideology in a state if there's not a sufficiently strong countervailing force.
One of the problems I see, if I look at myself, is that I want everyone to be happy and free and whatever, but it doesn't necessarily compel me to try and tell everyone that. It's a bit of an anomaly in the political sphere, because if you're a hardline leftist, you really want everyone to do what they're told. If you're a hardline libertarian, it's like you kind of really want everyone to do what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't really work politically.
Totally. I mean, well, I've never wanted to force my beliefs on anyone. And if there were some even smaller, more realistic way of doing this, right? There is actually a part of me that feels a bit of mild guilt about, coming into New Hampshire. But there are a ton of people who like us. I think that's very important as well. I mean, there are lots of sort of, you might call them natural libertarians in America, and there are air quotes around natural since this is a podcast. I don't know what the right term for it would be, but like, they're they haven't read a book. They couldn't tell you a libertarian philosopher. They're probably not the most consistent in their ideas, but they have this impulse towards just sort of letting people be and, not stepping on, each other's toes, and they're not that inclined to, sort of envy and sticking their nose in other people's business. And you'll find this sort of, there's I actually think throughout New England and America, there's a lot of that kind of person, but there's particularly a lot of them in New Hampshire. And so there are a lot of people who are quite glad, right? So it's kind of the left, the Democrats, the progressives, they try to make us public enemy number one, but there's a huge libertarian network, and then there's all of these local natives and largely Republican conservative types who are quite happy to have another ally against the left or whatever.
I suppose it's the kind of frontier attitude of America in general. Is it? I mean, it's obviously it was a political experiment to begin with. But it's founded on people running to another country to be left alone, I would imagine. Is that fair to say?
Well, we get different types. There's a lot of, I see, the frontier type, I think, is very common here at this conference. The sort of European libertarian, the free cities oriented one. They want frontiers. They're frustrated. And I'm that way too. So I share that 100%. I'm so frustrated by the fact that it's almost impossible to innovate in a number of ways. I'm not saying one can't innovate. Obviously, innovation continues to happen, but there are a lot of really interesting areas where it's impossible to innovate, and I see that as the government's fault. And so if we had frontier spaces, we could do some of these things again. But you get, in terms of inside of our movement, there's types like me. You get the sort of collapsatarian, doomer type. They're concerned about a downturn, economic collapse. They're oriented that way. We get. And you don't have to be all that way. You could just be a homesteader. You just want to be building a life for yourself where you're kind of out of the government's eye. It's more private. You have land. You have space. And so there's a variety of types that are inside of our movement. It's a lot of people. And so, in fact, in terms of people who are learning about it for the first time or checking it out for the first time, a lot of it is kind of finding what your sort of subgroup or sub-clique is. We don't all know each other. There's so many different institutions and different groups that people can find out about and become a part of.
So what's the main advantage then of going to New Hampshire if you're freedom-minded? I mean, presumably with 10,000 people, there is quite an impact.
Yeah. So there's distant benefits and there's immediate benefits. And the immediate benefits are, you get this marginally better policy. So maybe you're paying, several percentage less in taxes, or your cost of living goes down or whatever. But I don't think, a couple percentage one way or another is not going to make a big change in your life, whereas I think the biggest thing is the sort of social and psychological difference from having, this real density of people that share your values, where, my kids are able to go to, libertarian schools, or homeschool or various homeschool and ad hoc classes, where these are opportunities that I think if I had been in my sort of sort of tech progressive previous social circle, parents were much more neurotic. They were much more worried about kids getting hurt. Whereas here it's there's much more of like let's go, let's let kids try things. Let's have respect for their abilities and trust their own judgments a lot of the time in terms of what they what feels safe to them. Obviously, there are things you don't let them do regardless, but I think libertarians tend to be a bit more permissive in their parenting, and so things like this where going to the grocery store and just seeing a bumper sticker in the car, maybe not even seeing someone in the store, and knowing though that there's a member of my tribe. I think even again here at the conference, you see people. There's a sort of a joy or a relief in you being able to be around these people who sort of share some of your values and perspectives. And so I think that is it's not often like when people are doing the online research, they're like all about like, well, I'm calculating the tax policies and like looking at the, you know, I'm trying to find the best, you know, property and all of these things. And I think these things matter. And I'm not saying not to pay attention to them, but I think a lot of it is a sort of more difficult to quantify benefit from just being in that. And it's not one community, because it's so large. It's not one community, but like wherever you end up in the state, you'll end up in a libertarian community of some kind, just because there's so many.
Well, I mean, in the Free Cities world, there are a number of kind of theories on how best to sort of move forward, and one of them is communities manifesting on an ideological grounds, obviously. And I kind of tend to agree, and I think in this day and age, it's maybe a moment in history when that kind of stuff is going to flourish because of the internet. Essentially, you know, you've got online communities all around the world starting to manifest in real life. In my case, I'm a Bitcoiner, and I've got hundreds of friends now living in El Salvador, you know, which a year ago was one of the most dangerous countries in the world, and you know, and because the government legalized Bitcoin, made Bitcoin legal tender. They're just moving there with their families, and that's quite an impressive result. And I should imagine that if you track it forward enough into the future, these might be the new borders of the world, if you will. They may be ideological. However, and before you start talking, there are a lot of people that think ideological communities struggle to stay together, because when you look around the world, you don't often see that. You see cities full of different types of people. And what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think what we're going through is pretty new. For most of human history, there was always a frontier. So there was always a space where new people could push into. And there's certainly some sort of ideological conformity, not wholly, among the kinds of people who are interested in that. They are different in some way. The kinds of people who, you know, rushed across, America hundreds of years ago, or left Europe for America. Right? These are selection effects. There's something different, on average, about the kinds of people who do this, and that drive, that impulse, I think that underlies all of the examples that you were talking about, that it's the same, and because they don't exist in their former form, we're now making them in terms of subcultures and various things. And this is what I do think that this is what humans will do, and maybe this would be part of why there's the criticism of an ideological community. I mean, humans, it's just human nature to splinter into subgroups, and then sometimes once we're in subgroups, boy, do we hate that other subgroup, seemingly a lot more than the people who should be our real enemies, right? And so, movements, factionalizing and, fighting their own, definitely something that happens, but hopefully you can have, cultural norms or formal mechanisms, to prevent that. And I think in terms of our own movement, we recognize, the real enemy is the authoritarians, or the people who, are really trying to make the government as big and as forceful as possible.
How's the size of government in New Hampshire going? Is it getting smaller by any chance?
It is. It's the smallest. So it is. We've eliminated the only remaining income tax on income and dividends. So there wasn't an income tax, but there's a tax on investment income that was eliminated. We implemented a school choice program that costs 1/4 of the money per student compared to the public schools for people who enroll in it. The taxes that do exist have continued to go down, and spending has gone down as well, adjusted for inflation. And so we're basically the only state in the country that's cutting both taxes and spending. We're cutting red tape in other areas, huge occupational licensing reform. I mean, what a collectivist I am. I did none of this. Let me be clear. I did none of this. This is all the work of other people. They deserve all of the credit. Isn't it great to use that word "we" though and act like you did some of it? I just get to talk about it sometimes, but it's a lot of work from a lot of people.
What about the actual bureaucratic size of the government? number of people working there, because that's kind of like one of the worst parts of this whole thing, I think, is the
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm a bit of a stats collector for New Hampshire, things like that, and I don't know that number off the top of my head, so I'll have to look that up later. I will say, and this is both an anecdote, and there's actually some data to back this up from a website called Wallet Hub that researches this about like the New Hampshire government. And don't mistake me for like I would still like more private competition, but I use the DMV. That's where we get our licenses in America. I used the DMV in Philadelphia, and I used the DMV in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire was far more efficient, far faster, and so I have felt that while I'm still kind of getting government quality services and could imagine private services doing a much better job, it does feel better than other places in America at the same time.
Have any libertarian candidates got to the Senate in New Hampshire?
We have not. I think our most likely Free State or allied person would be Lily Tang Williams, who's running in one of our congressional districts, and she almost won the primary last time, and she's running again in 2024. And if I were a betting person, I'd probably bet on her. We also have a guy named Bruce Fenton, who was a pretty serious candidate.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he could potentially win a national seat, one day if he kept at it. I ran under the Libertarian Party though, which is it's a bit different, right? You kind of know you have realistic expectations about what you're doing there, and so I did try to I did some memes and some videos that went viral.
I saw them, mate. I've got to talk about them. They're very funny.
It's tough because you're describing jokes. It's like and then this happened in the video, and it's like you're just describing it.
No, I just before we sat down here, I just pulled up your YouTube channel and just wrote down all the titles of the videos. And I think you're the kind of person that Jordan Peterson would call low in agreeableness.
I am. I'm openly low in agreeableness.
But look, we've got war is gay, and then the follow-up video, war is retarded. Abortion is good, abortion is bad. And the one I really laughed hard at was the earth is dying and you should feel bad. And I mean, obviously, that doesn't make you many friends apart from people who are already on your team, I suppose. Like, what's the kind of idea behind that kind of strategy?
Well, I think there are a number of people who do recognize they're not going to understand libertarian philosophy, but they can recognize the absurdity of politics, right? And they can recognize how hypocritical and fake a lot of these people are. That they're liars, and so the videos are definitely designed to kind of just resonate with people, who kind of vibe in that way, because there's a lot more of those people than you're gonna, and I also am a believer that whether something works or not, like, if you've got 1/100th the resources. Or I mean, what's the 1/100th, right? You can't play the same game, right? You can't if you're up against Goliath, you can't go and wrestle him. You've got to take a different tactic.
Well, I mean, satire is the best way to deal. I mean, satire's always been the first thing that gets banned in authoritarian sort of like the authoritarian regime, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really does work. I mean, they have no sense of humor at that point.
Yeah, I mean, our movement uses satire a lot, and also there's we've actually gotten away from this a bit as we've gotten more explicit power, but in the earlier days it was much more. There was more like active protest because it at a minimum forces them to engage with you, and and that when you have very little going on, attention gets you something, can attract more people to your movement and your cause. And it's a lot of times it's been interesting. It really has been a movement that's gotten like more legitimate. Like it was fringier almost in the early days. And I have a lot of, I'm not trying to like use that negatively. I have a lot of respect for the people who came, the earliest, but now it's definitely, we're getting, some very serious people with money who want to, come and be a part of the team.
Well, the funny thing about satire, of course, is it's very difficult to tell from real life now. And that video that you did about the Earth is dying, the kind of absurdity of climate hysteria.
Yeah,
I mean, if you looked at it in a purely neutral way, everything that's said is roughly what is being said by advocates for climate change. But when you package it up like that, it does look pretty absurd. And I love the cuts to words like bad and depressed and things like that. It's very funny. But I know I could show that to a number of my friends and that would piss them off. They'd look at it and go, oh, this guy, what an idiot, fuck him, you know. So I don't know how much it's going to impact a lot of people.
Well, part of it, and this is where many people would call me a cynic. Of course, every cynic thinks they're a realist. I look at so many of these political arguments and they're just not real. They're not real. Like I think in fact, the abortion is good and abortion is bad perhaps gets at that most directly, because it's literally just like two different extreme takes on the thing. And it's like, I'll watch people argue about abortion. It's like, can you not tell that like neither of you, like no one we have these ethical beliefs, and I don't believe that we logically derive them. I believe that they're largely separate. I don't know exactly where they come from. I'm not smart enough to know the answers to these things, but I've seen people attempt to logically get people to change other people's ethical beliefs, and it just never works. So all this justification stuff is all on top of wherever those ethics are coming from. And so definitely part of both, I think, the Free State, and I'm not trying to conflate them, this is all just me acting as an individual, but I think the Free State movement is asking people to kind of be realistic about politics, and a lot of my stuff is kind of saying the same thing, and because it's part of what makes it absurd is this idea that like all this, that all this stuff is real, that we're actually changing people's minds, and that this is what's happening. Like your friends who are any given person who either believes or disbelieves in climate change, the vast majority of people can't engage with the scientific evidence. So how do any of these people have such a strong opinion about it one way or another?
I don't know whether you saw it, but there was a phenomenally cutting to the bone video that just came out about Israel-Palestine. And it's a guy not knowing how to tweet about it.
I saw that. Yeah, he's really funny.
And by the end of it, and this is just the most perfect part of the meme, he says something along the lines, I'm starting to think that I'm the victim here. You know what I mean? And because if I say Palestine, I get all these people come on me. If I go Israel, I've got all this. And normally, with Black Lives Matter, it's easy. It's just like the brown people. You just go on their team, and and it's like. It is true. And I agree with you as well when you say in the political sphere, no one's saying anything, are they? They're just not saying anything. It doesn't make sense. First of all, you know exactly what they're going to say, and secondly, it doesn't mean anything. And it's the way it was George Orwell described it. It was just hollow words that mean nothing, and everyone's looking at the king and saying he's got no clothes, but they're not. But they're just thinking it. Sorry, they're not even saying it.
Well, most people aren't, and I think also, I think a lot of people see the king as having clothes. Like I think that's part of it. Is that, and I know that I've come to recognize that this is, whether you want to call it like high disagreeableness or whatever. Like I do not fall very prey to like a groupthink. I don't think I'm reflexively contrarian either. There are plenty of, and quite often I'm like, well, can either of you sides see yourselves? Like, can you recognize what you're each doing? Like, I mean, climate change is a great example of this. I actually don't have the strongest opinion on this. I have a degree in physics too, so I'm smart enough to get through a lot of this stuff. And I'm always like, how is everyone else here to have the strongest, such strong and confident opinions? And as someone who has opinions on how you derive the truth, I'm like, why isn't everyone calling for a betting market so we can see what people actually stand? Because obviously when it comes to climate change, there's huge political, money and incentive. And you look at, this is a great, to come back to something I talked about earlier about going through this journey of feeling like the left is just, I don't think they're even conscious of the fact that they're lying, but their stated beliefs aren't what they want. They'll act very concerned about climate change, but how often is there an interest in, again, market-oriented solutions and these things that could plausibly solve the problem? It seems to me that a lot of what motivates the concern about climate, similar to what motivates a lot of left concerns, is more about this egalitarian impulse or this envious impulse. We need to chop down, we need to stop, we need to not let development, we need to prevent change, we need to not let just a sort of almost like an anti-progress impulse, because progress is differentiating and they're against things that differentiate. And so they want their own people to be put in charge to rein these people in, that's why they want bureaucrats. They want bureaucrats to be superior to the people doing the work and doing the building, because they're not, that kind of person they view that kind of person as a threat, essentially, to them. And that's why, so they come up with all of these reasons about, I want to help the poor, I want to help, or the earth is going to die, or whatever. But I've come to believe that very few of them are that's a sincere logical motivation, and it's more of an emotional motivation that they came up with logical reasons to justify their political beliefs.
Yeah, or in my case, I think it's, I know better than you, and the sort of distrust of the free market proves that, because in the free market we'd know exactly what everyone thinks. We'd know that if everyone could make their own decision based on sort of individual impulses, we'd soon know whether people care about the environment. Because on the whole, it's a luxury belief, isn't it? The caring about the environment. I think when I was a kid, it was like, there's rubbish on the floor, that river's polluted. There were things that you could easily kind of wrap your head around, and now there's this existential threat to humanity, which is, I don't know, the rise of sea level or the rise in temperatures, and that's a really it's very hard to have an opinion on that, because you can, on one side of the argument, we know people get really upset about existential threats because we've had millions of them over the years, and as far as I know, none of them actually came true. We never got hit by asteroids. We never burned to death. We never froze to death. So I'm always inclined to go, look, can we just chill out a bit and just, I don't think we're imminently about to die. I mean, it was in your video. I think in your video, we had 3 weeks to save the planet, didn't we? And there were dead leaves on the floor. People were looking at the dead leaves in autumn saying, look, the leaves have fallen off the trees and stuff, Isn't that the thing? It's this kind of alarmist attitude. And I know one day we're going to be wrong and everyone's going to go, see, I told you. But so far, alarmism has been a bad strategy, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true throughout human history. It's there's a lot of incentive to construct some kind of construct. You could even look at various any number of societal beliefs where it was of interest of some party or some group of elite. I think it's so interesting how, and you could apply this analysis to libertarians as well. I'm not trying to claim we're above it, but I think there is a surprising amount of, maybe it actually shouldn't be surprising at all, but that basically almost everyone's political beliefs are ultimately relatively self-motivating. And so for the same analysis you do to the left, I can do to libertarians. I'm an intelligent, rational man, and I'm like, well, society should be designed in a way that works well for intelligent, rational men. Right. It's really frustrating that you are holding back people like me to purportedly to help these people who
don't have the advantage of whatever.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, well, just let me, can I have an exception or something? But
I mean, there is, at least with that attitude, there is, you'd be quite happy for everyone to just do what they want.
Yeah.
Whereas I think from the other side, it's a bit more like, no, this is the way you should do it. I don't want to tell anyone how to live their life. I love it when they live a similar life to me, and I live by example whenever I can.
Yeah.
And which is why I think probably New State Project is a good beacon of this kind of thing, because it is people actually doing it, and openly.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's part of why I do think it's important that we, sort of own our beliefs, and by owning our beliefs, and then being good neighbors and being good community members and engaging, we should not be insular. It's great that we have our people, but it's also important that we don't be insular. We need to go out and engage, with our neighbors and everyone around us. But I thought it was interesting something you were saying. I was watching Titus's presentation about free cities and how he talks about them and introduces the idea, and it was clear that he deals with this objection that's this sort of what I now regard as like the essence of the left, which is but they're why these challenging I mean, I don't think they're that challenging, but the questions he gets about like how won't this just be for the advantageous, or like what about the people that they're leaving behind when they go to these cities or whatever. And it's like it is that if you are to leave your society to go to some new city, it's an implicit kind of rejection of the status quo of where you are, which is the most kind of psychologically triggering thing to the person with that, the more egalitarian and left and leveling your impulses are, because to you're like, how dare you? We're all supposed to be the same here, right? We're all supposed to be at the same, kind of level. And that I've come to believe is the fundamental, motivating impulse of leftism. It's why the environmentalists don't like Elon Musk, right? As another example of this stuff being, fake. Because, right, who's done more than him? Very few people, anyone. Yeah. And yet there's so much animosity.
He's even creating a get-out plan as well.
Yeah.
Mars,
right.
Or whatever.
Yeah. So like, how can you not love this guy? If those are your
point in question, California. Yeah. Literally, people are moving away from California because of the way it's being governed. Like people are moving. I know this from celebrities to friends of mine who are now living in Texas or have moved to Austin or whoever, whatever. I mean, it's a living example of voting with your feet. They're literally voting with their feet from a left-leaning authoritarian. I don't know what's your opinion on California, but I mean, I'm an English person. I sit there and look at it from a long way away.
In my view, every other state is left-leaning and authoritarian. So.
Right. What about Texas, though? A lot of people like places like that, don't they?
Actually, in my view, Texas actually gets has an unfairly good reputation. I think Florida is legitimately a decent choice among the continuum of American states. Texas, I'd have much lower.
Why is that then?
I mean, I don't think it's actually that. It's not that in terms of the laws in a variety of areas. I just think they have a better reputation than they deserve, whether that's taxes or personal freedoms or regulatory freedoms and occupational, all kinds of things. I just don't think they're actually that good.
They are the one state that often threatens to sort of become independent as well.
They do, and I love I love that. I know good libertarians in Texas. I know a lot of people who have ended up in Austin, and I'm not saying it's a bad place to be. I just think if you were actually trying to grade the states, it wouldn't be that high.
Okay, then what about this? Is another.
But I mean, everyone's fighting for second here at best. I mean, right. We already know who won the beauty pageant.
This is another thing that, as an outsider looking into the libertarian movement, especially the American one, everyone says they're always infighting, always no one can decide on anything. Is that a good characterization?
There's what's the name of the law? There's like the less important something is, the more people fight over it. There's some law someone has.
Sod's
like
law. Is it?
Yeah. So I think that is. Yeah. And there's definitely well, first of all, there's I think a natural we see our in group, and if you notice. Any sort of sufficiently sized movement I've been a part of has its internal conflicts. And I think that a lot of times we don't see the other side's internal conflicts. And so we tend to think that like they're working together, why can't we? But everyone kind of feels that way on the inside at times. I think on the whole, both, the Libertarian Party and Free Staters and so on are working together more than they're not. I guess I'd maybe grade Free Staters a bit above the Libertarian Party, but there's plenty of there's internal conflict at times. That's just seems to be human nature. We should try to find ways to reduce it. In the case of the Libertarian Party, it does. I do think they could use some structural reforms. Like I think part of it is they have a design where sort of the levers of the party itself, who controls it change every 2 years. And there's, so basically the control over all of those, resources is effectively up for a vote every 2 years. And so that's I think maybe incentivized in a sort of natural way, splitting into factions that are trying to like whip votes to ensure that their faction is now in control of these resources on the other side. It's also kind of a fundamental problem of democracy. So I don't know exactly. I don't have my list of reforms off the top of my head, but I think in terms of the Libertarian Party stuff, I do think some of it is like structural, and they could look for structural reforms. That's
the other thing that actually turned up when I Googled you. Have you just been kicked out of the new Free State Project authority or something? I don't know. What was that?
Yeah, there's been some internal conflict among the Free State Project board of directors.
Wait a minute. So with the Free State Project board of directors, how does that?
It's just a private organization. It's just a group of 5 people that appoint each other. So it's a legal entity that's separate. So it's just a collective of 5.
And what does it do?
It runs the Free State Project website and the social media feeds, and it employs. It runs 2 events a year, PorcFest and Liberty Forum, and it has 1 full-time employee that's there to like help with.
And you were on the board, and they voted you out.
Yes, that
disagreeable by the looks of it.
Perhaps. I mean, I think that I was doing a certain style and presentation and marketing, mostly under my own name, that I think it's been very effective for our movement. I think a lot of people, quite frankly, wouldn't have heard of the movement if it wasn't for me, or I played a role in helping people become aware of it. It's natural if, that you, especially if part of my style is at times to be, confrontational or aggressive. It's a style. Like anyone who wants to be, and this is what frustrates me at times with some of my critics. It's like, if you would like to have the intellectual conversation, I will have it. Right? I did a formal debate against Matt Kibbe, a very smart economist at PorcFest last year, and I beat him. Okay, so if they want to bring facts, we can do the factual, calm discussion. But I've
been on this podcast.
I've emotionally triggered people because they don't like some of the things that I do. And once someone is emotionally triggered, it's very difficult to bring them back into the realm of fact and reason.
Does it make any difference to your connection with the Free State Project then?
I mean, if you look at the comments on the video that they put out, I think the vast majority of people think that it was a bad decision. I think I'm still 100% a supporter of the movement. I see it as a decision of 2 people. And so 2 people out of 10,000 aren't going to sour me on what we're doing.
Why don't you start an alternative?
Some people are encouraging me to do that. But, we have exit and we have voice as well. And so, I think right now we're engaging in some, I would like it to be relatively delicate politicking. Like I care a lot about the movement, I don't even love the fact that we're talking about this right now, honestly, because I think they've made a mistake, but I see them as still people who, ultimately want the right thing. It's like sometimes people get emotional, they get angry or whatever. Like it's not, so that's kind of how I look at it.
It would make sense to create some competition in the market then, wouldn't it? Because then at least who, you want a Coke and a Pepsi.
Do you? I mean, I'm not, maybe.
It always happens though, doesn't it? You always get Canon and Nikon, Coke and Pepsi. Yeah, there's always a bit of competition.
I would like us to be as united as we can against the people that I regard as our real enemies, which are the people who want to increase the power of the state and the government in New Hampshire as we're trying to shrink it, And so I don't know. I've had a number of people encourage me to do that, and I will consider it, but I would like to, I'm not going to race to do that either. I don't think. What
on a day-to-day basis then? What do you do?
Well,
I didn't even ask you about. I think you've been in the tech world for a while.
I am. So I'm the CEO of Library, which owns a website called Odyssey, which many people use. It does around like 30 million. It does like it's like 20 to 30 million web visitors each month, and it's a sort of Web3 video social sharing platform. We however also had some battles with our own government over that
copyright
service
and stuff.
Funnily enough, I thought copyright is what I would face a legal battle over, but no, we lost a lawsuit with the U.S. government over securities issues.
You got a token or something?
That's right. Yeah. So we had a very long lawsuit with the SEC. It was it was a relatively big case in America, but that case is over, and it's likely that it's not 100% clear what's going to happen, but there's a decent chance that both of these entities will be. We're kind of seeing out. I'm seeing out how all this is playing out. So then, with sometime in the very near future, we'll see what happens with these things.
But I mean, that's going to carry on. Do most people in New Hampshire have two jobs? There's the libertarian side, is anyone apart from the politicians, I suppose?
Well, I mean, even the politicians it's actually mostly a part-time job, and the activism or evangelism that I do, it's just a part-time thing that I do on top of my work and everything else.
All right. So okay, you're not thinking of moving into like Matt Kibbe you were talking about.
Yeah,
he's kind of got a media kind of personality career, isn't he? Yeah.
I mean, that's never been me. Like I've done more of it in the last 4 or 5 years than I ever have in my life. But so I expect I'll probably continue to do some of it. But I've always been like my previous 2 things were tech entrepreneurship. We're building tech companies. So.
Stand-up comedy? Well, why not?
I mean, should I start a tech company or become a stand-up comic?
I'm thinking,
life presents you so many choices.
Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks was a good, sort of like activist comedian, wasn't he? Really?
I think there's more money in the tech company.
Yeah, probably. So, all right, then moving forward, then let's say with Free State Project.
Yeah.
Is it something apart from times like PorcFest and that, do you all sit around and say that here's our plan, this is what we're going to do?
Well, like yes, but not all of us. It's because they're separate. They're separate factions. So like the political people are getting together and they have their own. Structure. There's the Free State Project people who are focused on marketing. They're getting together and they have their own. And those groups will talk to each other, but they're not like being like, this is my plan. Is it okay with, and occasionally that also means like they'll step on each other's toes and stuff, but generally people are friendly because there can be tension between say, and this probably caused at least some of the tension in our own movement, which is like, but how loud do you want to be about, and I'm not saying loud about libertarian beliefs that might be like maximally offensive to common sensibilities, but more just like I'm a big believer that we should be proud that we're free staters. Like I think my beliefs are correct and morally right, and I'm proud of them. I'm not ashamed of them. I'm not trying to stuff someone in the face if they don't agree with me, but I'm not gonna hide them. But that's something that also there can be some disagreement on.
What do you make of the Free Cities movement then that you can see here?
So I think it's great. I think they're trying to thread a needle, but if enough people try, someone will eventually, and all it takes is one person to do it. And so I think if it can happen, it would be really tremendous. I think the fundamental challenge that they face is that everything that's, at least from my perspective, other people can disagree with this, but everything that's interesting to do in a free city is going to also be an existential threat to the free city. And I don't mean like vice crimes or things like that. Yeah, I mean more things like whether you're doing interesting biotech stuff or interesting financial stuff, or because to me it's that frontier, that space where you can innovate. Well, there's also a reason that sort of global net, has swallowed the world. So all of a sudden, you have someone doing, I don't know, like genomic editing in your 100 person or your 1,000 person, startup city, and there's billions of now it's a $100 million, billion dollar industry, and some either multinationals are getting upset, or some governments, or it becomes some ethical issue in the United States, or who knows, and right, like.
You mean a threat, as in a threat from the state coming in and saying this? We got to stop this.
Essentially, yeah, right. yeah.
But don't you face the same problem in New Hampshire?
Absolutely, yeah. But I think because, I think we're much more. What grants us more safety, I guess, is that we're doing it very much in an established way where there's a long history of these being sort of accepted means, and I obviously the Free Cities people are complying with international law and complying with the local law of their countries. I'm not trying to suggest that what they're doing isn't backed up by laws, but they're laws that haven't been. All this stuff it's just newer, but no, I think we would see the same thing happen. I think if New Hampshire ever say. And it's funny as I look for these things and honestly haven't even been able to find them. But how do you unlock? Could you change a state law and all of a sudden, unlock some industry that's been sort of forbidden across the rest of the across the rest of the U.S. Because this is where the value is, right? Like this is whether futures markets I think are a great go-to example. I mean, crypto is supposed to unlock some of this stuff, and in my view, it kind of failed. Which was disappointing. I mean, it might still succeed, but it hasn't succeeded to the degree I thought it would a decade ago. And so, but there's all of these areas where the government is or various governments are holding us back. And so, there will therefore be a lot of value, copyright and innovation. I mean, we're about to go through it with AI, right? So, AI, I think it's decently likely will end up regulated in a lot of places, or will get neutered for political reasons or copyright reasons, or who knows, right? And so we're about to have, in my view, what's a very exciting and promising, technology, and similar to other things, decently likely it's going to get neutered.
Isn't that just another way I look at it? Is it's all because of the internet. The internet is destroying the middleman in so many old institutions and old businesses and old, and you watched it happen with, say like the music industry. Then it's happening with money now. And presumably it's governance is next. And it's this explosion of information. And going back to what we first started talking about, it makes me think that libertarian ideas just didn't get circulated that much before. Whereas now you go on TikTok, you can hear someone say freedom.
Yeah. Well, social media has definitely enabled us to sort of find our tribe, and the internet in general, although social media has accelerated it. I mean, our movement started that way. It started by people coming together online, although it was pre-social media, it was an email list, but email list is kind of the...
I've still got one. Yeah. Still my most powerful tool.
Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, that's... I know that there was some talk about Balaji Srinivasan's ideas around the network state, and that's the same kind of idea. You're coming together online. And I actually think our movement could backfill and take some of those ideas, because we were some of that without some of the formal structure that he would propose. And so, yeah, this is that new frontier. But Free Cities have the potential to do that. But again, this really interesting. Well, okay, so you have your free city, and what happens if your free city says, "Well, we're not regulating AI"? And then there's these, are you going to actually be allowed to do that?
Well, I mean, that's presumably there's an international version of that going to happen constantly. I mean, it's happened with copyright in Thailand. You can do whatever you want. In America, you probably can't copy someone's DVD, can you?
Right. And so sometimes they'll play a containment strategy. So, but if you went to Thailand and said, I'm setting up everything Flicks, and for $10 you just get everything because I'm in Thailand and I'm not respecting copyright law, you would get shut down.
Can't you? Yeah, I think you can actually get that, can't you? Well, it's like places like the Pirate Bay and things like that.
Sure,
they position themselves in certain countries, don't they?
They will at times take a quarantine strategy. I think the strategy that they've taken towards BitTorrent and cryptocurrency has been a quarantine strategy, which is we accept that the technology is sufficiently robust that we can't eliminate it from the internet, but we can take a containment strategy that says that, okay, only a couple % of the sort of like smartest internet users will be comfortable using these tools. We will have tabooed them both through lawsuits and through sort of press and the way that they're talked about, largely because of the lawsuits, such that normal people feel that they're shady or I don't want to, or I'm uncomfortable, even learning about them. And so, yeah, they can't be stopped, but they have contained them. And so, but this is where it gets into, because it's not a black or white outcome. When I say like it's a very complicated political challenge with wide swaths of possibilities. And so, honestly, when I'd be looking at Free City founders, I'd say, like, is this the guy who's going to be able to navigate this? I think you need to have someone who's very politically savvy. And I would actually want the city to like be retaining, there should be some mechanism by which like you need a pool of money for bribes or payments or to navigate. And it's not even explicitly bribes, actually. I don't even mean like literally. I think in politics it's more frequently like over the table bribes where you're like, I'd like to support your charity for kids in the city, local politician, I was telling who was I talking to? I don't even need to name them, but I was sharing the idea that like these free cities should like get celebrities, get people out there. Like the more you can, because popular support is also another form of legitimacy. So you want to recognize, you want to be befriending the politicians and the powerful people who might threaten you, and you can also go popular and try to build legitimacy among the base. But that's what these cities will, at least to me, the big opportunity is when they're unlocking the possibility to do things that can't be done. That's inherently going to be threatening to other established interests, power centers, whatever. And so how are you setting yourself up to be able to navigate and play that so that when that threat comes in response to the interesting thing that you've unlocked, that you won't lose? Well,
I mean, it's actually happening now. And because we're a fleggling
space, it's already started.
We don't have the use. We don't have the examples yet. But currently, Prospera is being, so it agreed to have this ZA, as they're called, this Zone of Economic Development. Its independence was granted by one government, let's say, and then the new government's far left, and they've said no, illegitimate. However, it's wrapped up in legality, and now the government's in court.
Yeah.
And I would say probably because the government is using it as a political punchbag, whereas the people at Prospera really want the city to happen. So I would expect them to win because the legality is on their side. I mean, the government signed an agreement, an international agreement at that. So we'll see. But this is the point. It's like before I spoke to you earlier, I spoke to Joe Quirk. He's a seasteader. You know what the seasteading is?
Yeah.
You're right. They've got a few examples of what happens. Like, someone created a platform off the coast of Thailand and the Thai army just came in and pretty much stole it off them, even though it was legal. But that taught them that we need a flag. They were just a completely nationless raft. But so every time one of these things happens, there's a new understanding, and it's like, okay, right, we need to do that. And I think there are the factions who say we just need to establish a place and just say it's none of your business what we're doing here. But most people in the Free Cities movement are like, we need to make this something that governments understand that they want, which is exactly what happened in Honduras with Prospera and Morazan. The government get investment, they get tax, they get all these lovely things, which they actually really want. It's just the big bugbear is the political spectrum, because the lefties don't really like this stuff. They don't like free markets. It's all neo-colonialism to them and stealing our land, even though 95% of people at Prospera are Hondurans. By law, they have to be. You can't just go the workers, people that do all the stuff, they work in the offices, they're all Central Americans. It's like, but yeah, I agree with you, but I think it is a process.
Yeah. Well, look, and it depends on what you're trying to do. if you're just saying like I want some free city, but it's just like a bunker, like I'm trying to do Waco, Texas or something, like, yeah, you might be able to get away with that. Honestly, it's probably not easy either, but it's more like when you're, what they want to build, what I think the more ambitious ones want to build is they want to build this city that's a real city that's a meaningful player in, international, commerce and international markets. And I think that's where it gets very complicated and very politically tricky. And as you're saying, it's that way out of the gate. They haven't even done any and already just the idea itself is triggering to that sort of left psychology, right? Like, and that is real. I will not that I like agree with it, but like they are actually like psychologically like wounded or offended by the idea of it. Like even if you were to say that the politicians are just pandering, it's like, well, pandering to what? They're pandering to a real psychological impulse that's actually there among a decent portion of the population, right? Like that it really does, that there is a grievance there for at least some people, this idea that you would attempt to build a city and that with different rules, like you could have better ones. How dare you? And that impulse is a powerful one.
I think one of the better known strategies, as far as I can see, is that you begin with a special economic zone, which there are thousands of them all around the world, and then the reason there are thousands of them all around the world is because states and governments look at them and go, wow, this is a pretty good thing. And then stage 2 is, well, maybe we could have some people living on them. Why not? Like we've got all these businesses here. We've got sort of Western legal systems happening in the Middle East. That's weird enough already. How about we build some apartments there? Because people want to live there as well. And I think that's, in my intuition, that's how it progresses to a point where it's a bit like people say the same thing about Bitcoin and Bitcoin adoption is by the time politicians are rooting for Bitcoin, there's all these personal incentives going on. What politician is going to ban Bitcoin if he owns 20 Bitcoins himself?
Right.
Or herself.
Yeah.
And it is, I think it's similar with the Free Cities ideas, especially on that end of the spectrum where people are thinking, we really would like independence because we've got this idea, that we've got this way of governance that we really want to try out.
Yeah.
We may fail, but we just want to try it out. We want to be left alone to try it out. And I think it comes from everyone realizing that is a net benefit to everyone, which is a very tricky thing to do, I know, because there's always going to be a grievance here and there. But unfortunately, at the moment, it does seem to rest on the politics of the host government. That seems to be a pretty big factor, unfortunately. But there's no reason why your left-leaning utopia can't exist as well in the same way. Why not? I mean, the Free Cities model is come one, come all. Let's do it. Isn't
it interesting that there's just no demand for the socialists and the communists?
Well,
to
do you know
come
what? Someone said it yesterday on a talk. It's like, imagine you create a free city with social security, right? Who's going to come except people that want the social security? No one's going to come to pay it. No one's going to come to pay for, and I mean, there probably will be some philanthropists and some people who really care and who will come and say, here's the money to pay for it. But if people here's a free city where you get free this, free that, well, right. Everyone's going to come for the free shit.
Which is, of course, also why, and they would never give it to you in this words, but part of it is they recognize that this place is going to be more desirable to the kind of person who is helping their society function, and they don't want you to leave because you're paying the bill.
But like you say, is that really a thought process, or is it just a visceral kind of?
I don't think it's illogical. No, I don't. That's what I'm saying, and that's what I'm saying. That I think that like there's this right, because if they actually explicitly had that chain of thought, they'd be like a psychopath, right? Like that's. But I don't think they are. I don't think they are. I'm not saying that they are. I really think that. There's like, and again, because I can almost do the same thing to myself where like we almost have this sort of like political reasoning like benefit module that's almost, because I have all of my arguments are great for what, but if I think about it, like, well, is it better for me and people like me? Yeah, it is.
But like I say, I'll go back to that.
But it's not.
You want the other people to coexist with you, don't you?
But what's better for them and people like them is that I don't.
Right, but there is a real big difference between. But you could coexist with them just in a completely different physical space, couldn't you? And I mean, my having spoken to lots of people about this. My idea would be, lots of devolved small city-states, jurisdictions, all competing for your business, and you can have whatever you want. You can have, leftist utopiaville, and come on, let's let the market decide who goes to live there.
Right.
Well,
look, and I love that vision myself, 100%. But as you kind of hinted at, it's not clear that would these left ones, be able to compete? I mean, that's true today, right? Like all the agitation for, workers' cooperatives or worker-owned businesses or this kind of thing. It's like, well, they're not competitive in the marketplace. Like they exist, they're not competitive. And if workers wanted to own their businesses, they can save money and buy stocks and invest in and do various things. Like workers aren't. Workers could get together and do that. It doesn't, like, there are reasons that this doesn't happen, and the only way that you can force this kind of equality on workplace is to basically make it illegal for the more effective form of workleft to
use violence,
exist.
And at the end of the day, use violence.
So, but it's the same kind of thing. I mean, so we can say. And I, of course, yes, I love the idea that left utopian cities will be competitive in the marketplace. The same way I love the idea that worker-owned businesses will be competitive in the marketplace. In reality, will they actually be competitive in the marketplace? I mean, my guess is that mostly no.
So does this thing never end then? That's the question.
It doesn't end.
According to you?
No, no, I don't think it does. You just got to find a way to enjoy the ride, I think. So I don't know that it ends. I think it's human nature.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you there. But there's two attitudes to that. One is nihilism, and the other is what you just said, which is, well, you may as well make the most of what's happening.
Yeah, and I don't mean things can't get better. I think things do get better despite all of this. I think the world is better today than it was 100 years ago. I expect the world to be better in the future. I would like to play some small role in that process. And I think what everyone is doing with free cities and these attempts to create frontiers, I think they are making the world better. I think they're actually the small percentage of people that do that because it's the kinds of people who are the creators, the inventors, the innovators. It just turns out that if you're that kind of person, you're not actually appreciated. Like people, that's just a lie. People are happy to have the benefit, but they're still kind of mad that you could do it and they couldn't.
I tell you what, I appreciate. I've been walking around the conference yesterday just feeling really good.
Oh, I love them. I have so much respect for, there are so many people out there that are way smarter than me, that have done so much, and I have so much respect for what other people, I have that mentality, and the people here do, and some people do.
It's the optimism here as well, though.
Yeah,
there really is. I don't know a single person who in that hall who isn't optimistic about the future. That's that's in short supply these days.
Yeah, I'm actually very optimistic about the future. That's why I said some people think I'm a cynic, but no, I feel, hey, now I understand what's going on. Now we can find a way to do this that works within reality. I don't want to be a dreamer, but I want to be someone, I want to have a positive future that I can be working towards and contributing towards. I actually think that's when humans are at their happiest. When you have some sort of distant, goal and you feel that you're making some progress towards that on a regular basis, I think that is like a very fulfilling sort of psychological space.
What's your end game then, you personally? What's your goal? What's not the big goal, not the steps towards it?
Well, with New Hampshire, I want to get as close as we can to that sort of as fully private property, voluntary, contractual, kind of thing. Like I would love to see New Hampshire, ultimately becoming even city states, separate with separate rules. I'm sort of pushing for New Hampshire to become that frontier space. And if some other place beats us to it, then maybe I'll pack up and move there. But New Hampshire to me is a space where I can also be working on moving things in that direction, and I can still live a normal American life, which I like culturally. Like, I'm culturally American. I like American culture, and so I get to. I'm raising a family in a fairly, normal, typical, suburban environment, and but I have this larger thing that I'm part of and working towards.
Just before we go, because I've never been. What's PorcFest and what happens at PorcFest?
So PorcFest is the longest running and one of the largest, if not the largest, libertarian events in the world. It's about 2,500 to 3,000 people in the White Mountains of New Hampshire for 6 days. And it's most people camp, although there's hotels, Airbnb, and so on. And probably about 20% of people will stay that way. And it's a week-long, very laid-back festival slash partially a party, but there's speaking and a lot of serious stuff happening too. It's really something that you can make almost what you're interested in making it, into. So there will be talks, workshops, classes. There's vendors, there's food, there's sports events, there's hiking trips. It's just a week-long calendar of things that are available to do. And it's this bottom-up festival where anyone can put anything on the schedule. So there is a main venue that can hold about 500 to 1,000 people. And so for really large events, that will be used. But otherwise, a bunch of the things are just like little mini, workshops. People will take their sites and turn them into venues themselves. So some people will get 2 sites, fill it up with chairs, and use it that way. So also, if you're a sponsor, if you're selling something, I've heard some people say it's like Burning Man, but with way more capitalism, because it's completely everything is bought and sold, and that people are very comfortable with that. There'll be kids walking around with wagons, trying to sell you candy and sell you food. And
that was going to be one of my questions. I've got. Do many Europeans go, and do many families go?
Yes, it's a nice, I think PorcFest is a nice chance to practice our own sort of libertarian society rules. So we have there's a family zone at the Northeast, the Southwest. It's a large space. Again, it's a very large space. Then the Southwest zone is like a red light district that's zoned. So kids aren't supposed to go in there without parents. And so, that's the area of the campground that is
anything goes.
And you kind of, well, even I don't know if it's there's probably still some rules, but there's that's the space for the kinds of things that would be not kid friendly. The rest of the campsite is supposed to be kids can walk around, and then there's like earlier quiet hours and a playground and stuff in the like northeast zone of the campground. So I go with my 4 kids. I think it's great. Every time there's a lot of kids there. There's hundreds of kids there. There's a full kid zone, a kid track. I would guess that there's a lot of families in the Free State movement generally. So I would say easily several hundred kids at PorcFest, and it's a great time both for adults and for the kids. My kids are every time they go, I feel like they're like pushing their limits and developing in like a healthy positive way.
What time of the year?
It's the last week in June every year.
So good weather.
Yeah, and so it's a really fun time. I would recommend getting tickets as soon as possible, because it is something, particularly the campsites will fill up.
Sell out?
Yeah, we'll sell out. Yeah.
We're
actually, that's what limits capacity is. The campgrounds themselves we're kind of straining their capacity, so we're trying to figure out ways to continue to grow the event. I mean, like we've already been trucking in porta potties. We're starting to truck in water trucks. So we're stressing the limits of the campgrounds in numbers.
Well, I only heard about it last year for the first time.
Yeah,
I thought it was a festival of bacon or something. It sounds like it. Well, you get a lot of things like that in America, don't you?
Yeah. There is a pig. There is I believe one of the local farms brings some whole pigs, and they do a roast of a full pig at PorcFest, but it is not named after pigs.
Yeah. No. Well, Jeremy,
Porcupine Festival.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in. It's I want to get over there. Obviously, I mean, part of our remit here is to sort of go and visit in person these kind of projects as best we can. But I think being at the festival would be a brilliant time to go.
It's one of the best times to come. Although I encourage anyone who's interested, you can come out almost any time of year, and there's stuff going on. So PorcFest is a great time to target, but you can come out anytime. And also, if people want to, if you're coming to PorcFest, you can also stay a couple of days on either side and check out. There's the local community centers, the clubhouses. How do you
get into it though? Like, if say I came at a completely random time of the year, what's the into the sort of the libertarian world?
So you can go to fsp.org/visit, and we have a staff member who will work with you and help introduce you. Free Staters are also kind of like libertarian Mormons. We're very happy. You give us a chance to evangelize, and we're oh yes, please, I'd like to. So anyone can reach out to me personally. But literally, if you hear that someone's a Free Stater and you express an interest in New Hampshire, they're like, well, we want to talk to you. Yeah. So anyone's welcome to reach out to me personally. But the Free State Project employs someone, fsp.org/visit, and she'll work with you.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thanks for coming. Hope you've enjoyed your little dipping your toes into the Free Cities world.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
It's all part of the it's all part of the life's rich tapestry. That's what I think. All of these different projects. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks.